Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Out of Spec podcast. Today, I am going to be talking with other VinFast VF8 Plus, which is different than our Eco trim owners. They are fellow leasers who might even buy it out at the end and who have said that if they were given the decision to lease another VinFast VF8 Plus trim, model year 2023 electric vehicle, again, that they would do it. Today, I'm speaking with Judy and Larry, who have been on the podcast before, as it has been over 6 months, over half a year with their VinFast VF8 Plus in their possession. We're going to talk about their impressions, what their daily driving and road trips have been like, what they like about it, what the quirks are, and just kind of get the chance to talk to other VinFast owners about their experience. So let's plug in for that interview right now. This episode is made possible by the support we get from Fort Collins Kia. If you are in the market for any electric Kia, not only do they never add market adjustments, they will deliver your car to you anywhere in the 48 contiguous states for out-of-spec viewers. More information in the link in the show notes. Before I bring the lovely, wonderful Judy and Larry to the stage, a little bit of background. They have been on the podcast before. We met them in the dealership. They were there after a bit of waiting time, finally ready to pick up their VinFast VF8. They went with the Plus trim. They decided to lease it instead of to purchase it. And they had known about VinFast for a while. They'd been keeping up with the company. And let's just say, they're a little bit of pioneers in saying, hey, we're going to go with this EV. So we do go into a little bit of detail on why they chose that, but of course, check out that original episode that we will link as well. I do want to talk about just briefly the differences between the VinFast VF8 Eco and the VinFast VF8 Plus that they have and what we have. So right here, you're looking at a Plus if you're tuning in online, and I can tell right away because of this sunroof. The Eco is the efficient, less expensive model. If you go on VinFast's website right now, they are advertising the 264 miles of EPA estimated range per full charge. That's interesting that they do say that. And they are advertising a deal for $249 down, or $249 a month for 36 months, 0% APR plus the federal tax credit, or I guess $7,500 tax credit and bonus cash. So they're trying to sell these. They're advertising the VF8 Eco, which is one we have, for $999 down for $250 a month. I don't know. I know that some people went and got a VinFast after they saw our video. We are still testing it, obviously. We're only half a year in, and we've got 2.5 more years to go. But you can see right here, the MSRP for the Eco trim starts at around $46,000. The MSRP for the Plus starts at over $51,000. There are differences in the amenities, really. You can have different interior options with the Plus. You have the sunroof, like I said. There are some more manual options, like with the lift gate in the back. It opens itself up, and other nice features. Although the Eco doesn't have the ventilated seats or anything, but it has a heated steering wheel. It has all the safety features, but it doesn't have the panoramic roof or anything like that. So it is a little bit more plus, I would say, in the Plus trim, which is what they have. If we want to just briefly compare the specs between them, they are pretty similar. They have the same battery size, 87.7 kilowatt hours usable, same wheelbase, same overall dimension. The range is a little bit different. The Eco has a little bit of a higher range, the 264 EPA estimated range. We got 246 miles, I think. I guessed 247, which is pretty cool. And the Plus trim gets 243 miles of EPA estimated range. They charge the same. They both have the same two-motor setup, drivetrain, and the horsepower with the Plus is a little bit more, 402 horsepower, versus 349 horsepower with the Plus versus the Eco, and the warranty is the same. So we're going to talk to them about what's been going on. They have faced similar issues, just with quirkiness and glitchiness. They did originally, Judy named this EV, and it's their first EV ever, Glitchy, when they first got her. But now she's renamed her because the software update has gotten rid of those glitches. As I have said before, they've road tripped her. They have driven her daily. They use her. So let's just see, what does this couple think of their VF8 ownership experience? Let's go talk to them now. Okay, everyone, here now I am joined by fellow VinFast VF8 owners, Judy and Larry, who we met back in January at the VinFast dealership in North Carolina, where we found our VinFast and you found your VinFast. And we had you on the podcast before to update us on like why you decided to go with VinFast. What are your first impressions? And now it's been over half a year living with the VinFast VF8 Plus. You have the Plus, we have the Eco, and I'm excited to touch base again and see how things have been going. So thank you so much for coming back onto the Out of Spec podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. Great to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you. Yeah. So if people haven't watched the first episode with you, first off, I recommend everyone go back and watching it. But Judy and Larry, do you mind refreshing us on... So basically, Kyle and I went out to North Carolina to get the crazy lease deal that was advertised as $250 a month, $0 down for a 2023 VinFast VF8 Eco trim car. And we ran out to get that, and we met y'all there, and you were considering leasing as well. Turns out that you actually bought the VF8 Plus trim.
No,
We leased it.
You leased it, but you got the Plus.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. And you had been to Vietnam. You had kind of heard about it before, but maybe we can start like, you were at the dealership that day. What was the background of learning about VinFast? Because still a lot of people, they either know VinFast and they know the first impressions, which was the bad reviews, or they're just learning about it and they're like, what is this EV?
Well, 2 years earlier, we had heard about the potential that VinFast was coming to the United States. It's sort of news of that arrived just as we were beginning to think about what our next car would be, and had sort of modest interest in electric car. So we got on their Pioneer program, which just required a couple $100 down, and then just put it out of our minds and waited. And a year later, we'd heard again that they were going to honor the $7,500 tax credit through VinFast because it was potentially unlikely that the U.S. tax credit would work. So again, we just waited and then discovered in January that they had opened a dealership in the Cary area, Raleigh-Durham Cary area, which was really the first dealership outside of California. We'd been watching the California distribution, had heard about the various problems, but we're still intrigued. So maybe within a week or two of them opening in the area, we decided on a Saturday. I think Judy just called randomly and said, if we come over now, can we see a car? And they said, sure. So we went over there and test drove the car and got interested in it. And then, as you know, there was a 2-week window in which the car wasn't available. The software wasn't performing as they had hoped. And we just sort of went back and forth over the 2 weeks, awaiting the potential that we were going to be able to pick up a car. And then when we were out there finally to finalize the deal, that's when we ran into you and Kyle.
Yeah, in that 2-week period, though, we tried out a bunch of other EVs so that we had some feel of what they were in comparison to the VinFast.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an interesting part too, because like you said, Larry, you were a part of this Pioneers program, which gave you some, discounts on discounts, kind of these, benefits of saying, hey, thanks for believing in us early on. But then you also decided to drive around other EVs, and you still decided the VinFast is a good choice for us. So what finally led you to saying, okay, this is the EV lease that we want, even after the waiting, maybe like the question marks with the software and going through that process of kind of the unknown of VinFast?
Well, there was some silliness in that. There were others that were of interest to us, but they either didn't have wireless Apple CarPlay, which we wanted, or there was some other sort of nominal feature that disqualified the car. And so we kept coming back and saying the VinFast has everything we want. Ultimately, I think what sealed the deal was partially the price. So, the sticker price was about $53,000 because we had $10,000 in credits, both the $7,500 tax credit that they were going to make up and the original $3,000 credit that was part of the putting the $200 down, that brought the car to 43. So it became a little more favorable. But then the lease arrangement, which because the Eco was an even cheaper lease arrangement, but they offered a lease arrangement that was just ridiculously cheap. So even if we pay out everything, including the residual, it's going to be down to about 35. So now, why would we pay 43 out of pocket when we could pay 35 delayed over a 3-year window? So the deal was just too hard to resist. And we thought, it's a novelty. It's not an extraordinarily expensive novelty, and we can truly be pioneers and give it a try. And Judy liked the car.
Yeah, and I did. I liked the car. And we also figured if leasing it, if it was really as bad as they say, we could give it back after 3 years.
That's true.
But I liked it. I liked the roominess. I liked the size. I liked the way it looked. I thought it drove well. And so, I kept coming back to that. That was the one I wanted. So.
That's good. It mattered to you, all those features. And I think that the lease deals, no matter how they're coming about in the EVs for different brands right now, a lot of automakers are to get people, it seems like in their EVs are really throwing out some competitive lease deals. And with any incentives that you can get to it kind of makes sense, especially if you're new to electric or if it's a VinFast and you don't really know what's going to happen with the car, with the company in 3 years, then it's kind of like a safer bet to take than perhaps buying one, even from a reputable automaker. I think the lease deal just seems to be appealing to a lot of people, which I think sometimes folks are like, no, never lease a car. You want the equity in it. But right now it seems like this might be a good idea for at least VinFast and other electric vehicles.
Right. We don't know if in 3 years they may be so much better, the batteries so much, so we may want something that's, has better distance.
We appreciated the dealership. I think we mentioned last time that we had bought the level 2 charger, and a day or two after we bought it, they called and said, we appreciate what you put up with, so we're going to refund you the money. So they gave us the charger for free. So there were a couple of other attractive options that they threw in that made it appealing. So it's all worked well. The charger works well. The car's been in the garage for 6 months and out on the road. And
I've renamed it.
Okay, yeah. So maybe I'll refresh people's memory if they don't know. But first, as I would call the VinFast, it was a little bit quirky. It had its quirks, and then you also named yours Glitchy because yes, it is a little bit glitchy. Random errors pop up. It does funny things, and then they go away. So originally, she was named Glitchy. What about now?
Well, after the update, the update that we got, she wasn't so glitchy anymore. So I just call her Smoke because I've got a nice gray color.
Oh, lovely. There you go.
I think it's not glitchy anymore. So.
Which is a nice name.
Yeah, I liked it. So.
Yeah, I really liked how, so tell me about your process of getting the software update. How did that come about? How did you know like it was time to update? Because VinFast does not do over-the-air software updates yet. You have to.
No, they're not doing over the air. A friend of mine had gone in to have something done with her car and said, well, while it's here, we'll do the update. And she told me there was an update. So I called and arranged and brought the car in. And we left it for a couple days, I think. Mm-hmm. We didn't need it. We were going away for a couple days. So we just left it with them. So they did the update. And once we picked it up, we haven't been getting any of those stray notices at all.
Interesting.
The only one that we get is the charger, the
pad.
The charging pad for your iPhone.
Do you use it?
What?
Do you use the charging pad for your phone?
Yes, we do.
On the longer trips, we do. We don't do it on the shorter trips, and it works, but it remains glitchy.
Right. It turns on and off occasionally, but that's about the only thing that does.
I think that's also common in other cars. Like the wireless technology for charging your phone is still not ideal. Like your phone gets really hot and sometimes it doesn't work. So I'm not even sure that that's specific to VinFast, but that's great that you have like what happened with me, like those random errors that would come up when you would start the car or be driving, and then they would go away, and then maybe you never see them again, but they don't happen anymore. And so I feel like perhaps, the cars, the first rendition of the software that was out, at least when we got them, was it was very vigilant and maybe observing a lot of the issues and then throwing these errors. But with the software update, at least you had to change the name from glitchy. So I think that's a great sign. But I do know that there probably are still improvements that we would like to see with the VinFast. So of course, random errors, no one really wants that happening. Was there anything else that's come up? Like, I don't know if you saw, but for a minute, all the buttons on my steering wheel weren't working. So I disconnected the 12-volt battery and reconnected it. Yeah, and then it was fixed. So I was like, okay, a little reset. That's fine. But have you had anything like that happen?
Not since the update.
No, we've had no episodes of where the car needed to be turned off and left to recharge. I mean, it's literally operated exactly as intended since the update. Not a single circumstance of malfunction.
Interesting. Okay,
that's not to say there aren't. It's not to say there aren't still some features we wish would be different, but that's not. But it's not a malfunction. It's just the way the car is.
Can you tell me about those features that you wish were different?
Well, when the windshield wipers come on automatically, the sunroof and the shade always close. So you can't leave the shade open if the windshield wipers come on.
That's just a petty annoyance. I like to still look out, but it closes automatically.
Like I said, little things, little things like that. But otherwise, I really haven't noticed anything that,
No, we've used the cooling in the seats, which was a really fun feature that, I'd never had in a car before. And that's actually worked pretty well. I mean, I have a BMW X3 SUV as well. And I am reminded when I get in that there is a slightly smoother ride in that car than there is in the VinFast. It's not that the VinFast is a poor ride, but I'm just reminded when I get into the BMW that there is a difference in the suspension, that slight lag on the accelerator I'm still reminded of. Doesn't have that pure acceleration when you put the foot on the accelerator.
And I don't notice that at all.
But you rarely drive the other car.
Right. I don't normally drive the other car.
Yeah. So, there are a handful of people, but that's just the way it is. You drive any two cars, there are going to be differences, but I'm aware of just a couple of differences that, just they're in the nature of the car.
I'm glad you haven't had any.
Yanks a little.
Yeah.
I was saying, yanks a little hard for me still. If I'm in a lane and it does a lane assist, it's still, even if we have it set the lowest setting, it
doesn't stay the lowest setting. You have to keep redoing that.
Yeah.
So we don't. But it happens to you, I think, more than me. I don't get as much of the yanking.
But
interesting.
We're down to one hand's worth of issues.
Not even. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that is one thing that annoys me is resetting the driver settings that just should be remembered with the driver's profile. This is how I like to drive. This is the sensitivity that I want. I want you to watch me and make me really safe, or I don't. Like, just remember that with each profile. It does seem like an easy fix, but they definitely still haven't fixed that yet. I do know that ours right now is bricked. It's not drivable right now. I don't know. My colleague Jordan drove it to Missouri, out from Colorado, Missouri, and back again, and now it's having some issues. Now I don't know exactly what Jordan did with it. No, I'm just kidding. But it does have some issues. But I'm wondering. Yeah, I know exactly. I won't blame him. But I am curious if the more miles we put on it, the different kind of driving. I mean, I don't really know the kind of pushing it, but it shouldn't. I mean, obviously, it shouldn't be bricked. We're not exactly sure what's wrong. It's still an ongoing process, but it doesn't sound like you've had really any of those like dire situations where you're like, oh, I have to take this into the service center because this aspect doesn't work about it anymore. It's just more of the annoyances. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a bit. But in our drive to Nashville, we had it up. She would point out you're in a 65 mile an hour zone. Why are you going at 90? So we we pushed the car, at least I pushed the car pretty hard. We used the adaptive cruise control for a lot of the drive. I mean, really had it on for.
That's my favorite feature.
Yeah.
I love that feature.
Had it on for half hour, 45 minutes at a time. So really checked that it worked well in various traffic conditions. Hit a lot of traffic so that we had a lot of stop and go periods. So I think we took it through its paces, over 10 hours each way. We can talk about our experience getting a charge that had, that's not a VinFast problem necessarily, but
no,
the opportunity for charging is still challenging in some parts of the country.
Because I think the VinFast VF8 specifically can thrive as a commuter because, it's got a lot of space. You can put the family in there, the dogs in there. It easily gets you from point A to point B. And then EV road trips are kind of a different conversation, no matter the model that you have. But a car with not the fastest charging rates, that obviously affects the long-term trips and everything. And also it doesn't have, a built-in charging network like Tesla. So I drove our VinFast out to Colorado. I drove a Tesla back. So I got to see those experiences pretty close together and along the same route. So I'd love to know about your long distance traveling, what you've done, and then how your charging experiences have been. And if you have used, how do you navigate, how do you plan your charging stops and everything with the VinFast?
Well, we've always had us plan our stops because we're both vegan. So we're always looking for vegan food. So we're used to planning out our stops on trips. So that's really not a problem. We did it on a few different things between looking at plug share and a better route and using the VinFast navigation system as well, and tried to figure out where the best places would be to stop. I have to say that the VinFast navigation was as good as the others. They were basically telling us to stop at the same places, and it was pretty accurate as to what my battery level was when we got to there. So if it said you're going to get there with 16%, we got there with, maybe 15%. You might have been off 1%, but it was always pretty accurate about that. So that gave me a little more confidence that I was going to make it to these places. Let's see what else.
The charging speed was fine. I mean, I would say we're in the combustion car. It might have been a 9-hour drive with some of the traffic we hit. It was 10 hours with the VinFast. So, there are two more stops probably than we would have made, but collectively an hour was not a problem. In some respects, we both said this is actually a lot more relaxing because we knew we weren't driving more than about 2.5 hours max before we were recharging. We knew we'd have
get out, walk around, have something to eat, chit chat with some of the other people that might have been there, look at their cars. They were always asking us about our car because they'd not seen a VinFast.
So I think you travel with a little different state of mind than an EV, and you're just recognize it's going to take a little longer, and but it meant you have 20 minutes. You can go walk into the little shop and stroll around, and we packed our lunch so we'd stop and have meals along the way. So the drive out was precisely as expected. Driving back, we timed it poorly and hit Knoxville at about 5 p.m. on a Friday. And Knoxville has, as far as we can see, 2 high-speed chargers in the entire.
Well, 2 stops.
Well, there were only 2 we could find anywhere in that area. The first one, the equipment was not working well. The second one, there were 3 cars already there waiting. So it was more like an hour stop. And then we spent the night in Johnson City, Tennessee, and had to find a hotel that would have a charger.
Which we did.
So unfortunately, no one else using it, but it was a level 1. So it was
level 2.
Level 2. But you're right, level 2. But we plugged it in for the night, and it was fine the next day. So, it just takes a different state of mind, as you know. It takes a little more patience and willingness to stop more frequently, and knowing the drive is going to be, probably on average 15% longer than it would be if you were in a combustion car with a single stop. But for the most part, as expected, chargers worked fine. The car charged at the speed that we had hoped and expected.
There were a couple of times that we stopped that we had to use the app, and I wasn't sure how to use it. And there was somebody there that was really helpful helped us use the app, told us what to do. He said sometimes those the card readers don't work, put it on the app. So the people were very friendly, very helpful. We really enjoyed that too.
Yeah, I think that was a pleasant surprise about it, is it's been a very sociable experience stopping at the EV chargers.
I agree. Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying is what I've noticed about EV road trips, and having just taken a long road trip in a Toyota Tacoma camping around Maine. That car, you fill up the 20 gallons of gas and then you really don't have to stop for a while. And I was getting like antsy. I was like, I want to stop and like get out and walk around, because on EV road trips now I'm used to it. Yeah. Like you have a time to stop and walk around, and just even like I will just like sit on a bench nearby and outside of the car and get some fresh air. And you can stop along the way with the combustion engine road trips for sure, but it's a little bit of a different thing. And I don't mind having that different perspective of, the road trip might be a little bit longer. But as I compared my Tesla to VinFast stops, even because a lot of people even put the Tesla road trips above the CCS road trips, they were pretty similar in the stops that I had to take, right, and all of that. And it was just a little bit easier because the Tesla straight navigates you there, just as like you could pull off and go to a gas station anywhere. But about EV road trips, I do love the stop and smell the roses and the social aspect of it. And I'm glad to hear that folks were helpful along the way, because sometimes you run into the technical issues and you might not have the app, or it's like maybe a Francis energy charger versus the Electrify America or EVgo that maybe we're more used to. And it's like, okay, what exactly do I do here? But it's nice if you want to talk to people. And as you kind of have said before, like if you're the first kind of adopter of something in a way, to have a little bit of a community when you pull off to charge is nice.
Well, like I said, if you put the navigation in the VinFast, it would navigate you to the stops for your charges. So, that would have worked perfectly fine. He just doesn't like the map on the VinFast. So we just put it in the Google Maps because he likes that map better.
I just find the VinFast map impossible to read.
But it would, and it doesn't speak to you yet. That's the other thing, that right now the navigation on the VinFast does not talk to you. Mm-hmm. So if you want to hear it, where to turn and what to do, you're not getting that with it. So we would use the Google Maps, but it was basically the same stops. VinFast would have got us to the same places without any problem.
Mm-hmm. It's a little disheartening to see how many EV chargers are malfunctioning. I mean, it's, I feel like the infrastructure is, thin as it is. And I know there's a lot of money that's been allocated for more EV charging, which is slow coming, but the maintenance seems to be hard pressed. So I don't, this was really our first experience with any significant amount of charging, but we'll watch for that. But it just tells you have to have backups at every stop too.
Yes, that's what I noticed too between the CCS chargers, as well as that I was also always planning like, well, if this one doesn't work, I could probably get to that one or whatever, but using like a better route planner or plug share to see like reviews and make sure that they're working is important at this point, although I wish it weren't. And yes, we have the NEVI funding and stuff, but it's slow to roll out. So I would love to know a little bit more about like, okay, so this might have been one of your first really like long distance public charging experiences. And I think generally we've seen improvements. There's been a lot of feet held to the fire when it comes to maintenance, but I don't think everything's perfect. So what was it like at chargers? Did they usually work? Did you have to plug and retry again? What was it like?
Pretty much all the chargers worked except for the ones that we were in Knoxville. Every place that we stopped heading out to Nashville, we stopped at 3 different places, pulled right up. Some were EVgo, some were Electrify America, worked perfectly fine, not a problem.
Yep. In Nashville, we stayed at a hotel and there was a charger literally at 30 seconds away that would just pull the car over and charge there probably 3 times and plugged in once, and it worked every time. One
thing we did notice is when you would stop the charging, I couldn't take the hose out right away. I had to wait to take the plug out. It didn't seem to, even that the car said disconnect and the charger said disconnect, it wasn't disconnecting.
Yeah.
So we would have to wait a minute or two before it actually disconnected and we could remove the charger.
Yeah, there's a lag.
Interesting.
At least we experienced a lag.
That's what we experienced. Yeah. And we don't experience it at home.
Mm-hmm.
We don't experience it at the home charging. So maybe we're doing something wrong. Maybe we were supposed to unlock something first, or, I don't know. But that was something that we had an issue with.
But basically,
Yeah.
we wait 30 seconds to a minute, and
Right,
then it releases.
Right. So it's not really, it wasn't a big issue, but it was a little concerning the first few times when we thought we weren't going to be able to get the plug out.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Because there are some cases of like the Nissan Aria will lock and not let you out, and you have to like press a certain sequence on your key fob to get it to unlock. But folks obviously don't know that, so then they're stuck at a charger trying to figure out what's wrong. But there's a noted issue with that. So yeah, I wonder, was your car, maybe your car wasn't locked or anything? It was just a lag.
Well, we'd lock it, after the charging began, and we were going to go for a walk or something. We'd lock it.
Yeah.
And then when we come back and unlock it.
Right, because I'd unlock it and get in the car and hit stop charging, as well as doing it on the charger. So the car was unlocked and we still couldn't take it out.
It may be us. We don't know.
We're still working on it.
Yes.
That was it's a small thing we noticed, that sometimes we can't quite get the sequence of when it's ready for us to unplug, but minor issue. The fact that it plugs in fine, charges fine, we're getting really good speed.
Yeah, we got pretty good speed. I'm sure others get faster speed, but for us, we were fine with it. We never charged to 100% on the road. We charged to 70 to 80. We were trying to be mindful, especially if there were people waiting to do that. So we're trying to keep etiquette.
Yes, the EV charging etiquette. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it sounds like generally you weren't stranded anywhere. The VinFast hasn't really had any huge malfunctions for you. And the long distance road trip was kind of just like anyone would experience in a CCS vehicle. If anything, the little annoyance there, we're not exactly sure. And we are kind of conscious too on our team. We're like, okay, as we're getting to know a new car, like how much of it is human error and how much of it is the car when we're like just trying to figure out how it works. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. So we've been very pleased with as I said, the car ride itself was, was terrific. I mean, no problem with speeds, no problem with navigation, no problem with, sort of feeling like you're on the road. We drove in heavy rain. We drove in a lot of heat.
And I find that when I'm driving in it, knowing that I have the adaptive cruise control, I'm not as stressed driving. I'm not holding the wheel as tight. I'm not worried that I'm going to go into another lane by mistake, especially when I get to places where they're doing construction and you have, no shoulder and it gets very tight. I'm no longer worried about that, where I used to get a lot concerned. So
I love that aspect.
I'd buy it again. I'd buy it again.
Interesting. Wow. Okay, that's great. I know that you did mention range before, and like how you would like, maybe either however they figure out how to have more range. But can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, what would you like to see in terms of how far you can get on a charge or before you need to charge again when it comes to the EV range of the VinFast VF8, and kind of, what you could dream of it improving to?
Well, right now it says 250, 256, but you're not going to do that because you're not starting at 100 and you're not going down to 0. So we were probably driving about 150 to 175 miles, I would say, before we would charge again. So it would be nice to get a little bit more than that and not have to. And I also learned, since there aren't always another charger that close nearby, I'm not letting it get below 20% before I charge it up, because I don't want to get stuck at 10% and then not be able to get to another charger if that one doesn't work. So as a result, we're charging a little bit sooner probably than we should, because I don't trust the infrastructure yet. Not because I don't trust the car, it's the infrastructure.
So I pushed someone's button in social media. There was a Facebook ad for the VinFast that was touting its 264 miles of range. And I posted and I said, love the car. Just to be clear, 264 is if you actually had it at 100 and ran it to 0. Nobody runs it from 100 to 0. You're going to run it from 80, maybe 90 to 20, which means about 160 or 170 miles. So truth in advertising would mean you're really going to get about 160 miles, 170 miles, on a charge before you recharge it. And I got a couple of really, we've tested it and it really is 264. I said, well, I'm not disputing that if you charge it to 100 and run it to 0, you'll get 264. But I'm just saying
most people don't enjoy it that way.
In normal driving, expect to drive about 2.5 hours and about 165 miles. That's the range you're really going to. But it was, then I stopped responding because I didn't mean to piss anybody off. I kept saying, I like the car. I'm not complaining about the car. I'm complaining about the sort of messaging as if anybody's really going to get 264 miles.
But that's how they all do it. So if you want to compare apples to apples, every car is doing it from 100 to 0. So that's, it would be nice if it would be a little longer so you wouldn't have to stop if you didn't want to that soon. But, I just figure every 25 miles, I'm going to lose 10% of charge is what it happens in my car. So I can pretty much figure out exactly how many miles I can go.
Okay.
That's been pretty standard.
Yeah. I mean, with the EPA estimated range, like that's why we do our testing too, is because that's one way of testing. It's perfect conditions. It's 100 to 0%, but really understanding, okay, what does that actual metric mean? And how will this actually affect the general user? I think that is important to highlight that, but no doubt, like when you're commenting on it, you're going to get some feedback sometimes, Larry. So sometimes you got to catch some heat for looking out for other EV drivers, and that's okay. That's what we got to do here.
Yeah. But I also know in a lot of gas cars, you can get 300, 325 miles on a tank of gas. So it'd be nice if we could get closer to the 300 miles on a charge.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Totally agree.
Really get 300. So that means it's got to go to 350 so you can really get the 300. I would feel a lot better with that than the 250.
And I'm a 10-ish mile an hour above the speed limit driver. I'd really like to know, and maybe when you finish your testing, to what extent does that really reduce the range? Because I'm not necessarily yet convinced that driving faster. I mean, first of all, I'm not going to drive 55 in a 70 mile an hour zone. So there's no use telling me that 55 is the most efficient speed. I'm going to drive 10-ish miles per hour above the speed limit. So it'll be interesting in the testing if you ever get the car unchecked. What truly happens if you're driving at 70, 75, 80 versus driving at 60, and does it really reduce efficiency? Have you already done any of that? Do you know if that's the case?
Yeah, we do typically know that the faster you go, I mean, just the more energy you're pulling from the car. So for a long amount of time, you're going to see the battery discharge quicker. And especially if you're running the AC, like if you're running the AC, it's a heat wave and you're going like 85, you will see the battery drain quicker. And then it's also the like for you, Judy, if you're like, oh my God, I do only have 20% or 10% left, but I need to make it this far, dropping it down to 55, 60. I've had to do that before to stretch it because I was like, I did this exact scenario. Actually, I was like going faster than I intended, blasting the AC, and just gaining a minimal amount of elevation. But I was like, wait. My estimated arrival at this charger is going down very dramatically. So let me slow down and stretch it. And I got there a lot lower than I intended to, but it does. Yeah. You saw that.
I saw one of Kyle's when he couldn't get it charged and the next charger was too far and he drove it like 30 miles an hour and he stretched it and got there. So I do know if you go slower.
But I will say that, when we've begun driving and we have an estimated remaining charge, no matter how we've driven, we get there with about that same estimated charge. That's with
good.
The air conditioning blasting and pushing the car. So I haven't experienced on a long trip any sort of reduction in energy beyond what was expected.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And I would love for our audience to also chime in on their experiences with their EVs, like if they do notice that, because it's also how good your guessometer in your car is, where it's like, all right, Larry's driving and we're going fast, and this is how the battery's going to drain. So this is how far I know we're gonna get, or what the estimated state of charge upon arrival will be at this next charger or this next destination. But I think the most important part there is too, like the accuracy of the car to know what you're going to arrive at, so that that, as the driver, I'm going to arrive with this much power in my car when I get to my next stop. And I did find as well with my data that I collected from the VF8 road trip, it was quite accurate on estimating my, my estimated range and my estimated state of charge upon arrival, which is great. I mean, that should certainly be accurate no matter how fast or slow you're driving.
Right.
And you said that you would buy it again. And I know that once, you were looking into this, like you talked to friends about it. You mentioned one friend who took theirs in to get the update and let you know about that. So even with the glitchiness that is now mostly fixed, but the little bit of annoyances with the reputation from VinFast, I would like to know just a little bit about your expectations for the longevity and the reliability of the VF8 Plus in the coming years, because you have it for another 2.5 years with the 3-year lease. And do you continue to recommend it for others to lease or buy a VF8?
I do. I would, but I always do it with, with the caveats that this is a fairly new car and a fairly new company, and you may find some glitches and there may be some things. I look at it as we're basically beta testing the car. So we're trying to work out those issues. I also know there are new updates. I don't know whether they're available here in North Carolina yet, but I see on Facebook people have updated to 16. Some says I have 18. I'm thinking, well, I'm at 12. I don't know what's available. We haven't called them over there to find out. So I don't know if there are more updates at this point. And part of me says, car's working just fine. I don't know if we want any different updates. Maybe some of the glitchiness is going to come back if that update's not quite right. So I'm not rushing out to get it, but I'm hoping that those updates fix those other things about, some of it said they've fixed the settings so that if you set it certain things in your profile, they will stay. So I don't remember which ones, but so that may be something that's coming.
And I would remind you, when we bought our car, two of our friends bought cars as well. So we actually have a cluster of 3 cars that we track, and they're all fine. So it's we can actually represent 3 cars, which is probably 10% of all the cars in North Carolina. No,
not quite.
Not quite. But I will tell you that the other 2 that we know of that are around the corner from us, they're working just fine.
I spoke to a woman today. And I said, have you had any issues? And she goes, nope, car's been perfectly fine. They had a few at the beginning and now it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So,
but to Judy's comment, I mean, communication is not great. I mean, you don't hear from the company at all. We don't hear anything. So I don't know whether we should or not. I don't know whether, given the newness of the car, whether there ought to be more occasional messaging from VinFast or from Leith even that just says, next update's coming or things to be aware of. So we are in a no news is good news perspective, but it's a little bit of a silent bumble. And as you may remember, VinFast is supposed to be building its massive plant here in Chatham County, about half hour from where we live. They've already delayed it once. They've just recently delayed it now to 2028 and downsized it. So it also has a sort of a little suspicious of what's going on and what's the long range. So to your question about long range, we're looking at long range as well in terms of continued support. I will say we had a little nervousness. Was Leith going to maintain its relationship with the car? Did they want to not continue to be a dealer, and what would happen if that were to occur? But so far so good. But Judy is very active on the social media sites associated with VinFast, so she's reading everything.
I see all those things that come out. That's why I know that some people have updates, but some of them are in Canada. They get the updates, it seems, before we get them here in the States. So I don't know what the updates are. Now, you asked me that's how I found out the last update. And I asked the service guy, he said, no, what we're doing is updating the people who are having more issues with their car first. He said, and then I call to the people further down to let you know there's an update. But the ones that are having problems, we want to get them in first and get those fixed. And you weren't having any problem, any real major problems, so we didn't rush out to call you. But as long as you called and asked for the update, come on in and get it. So sometimes I think we might have to be a little proactive in that.
Yeah, I wonder how different the... Go ahead.
But the dealership here, when we've had to deal with them, have been fabulous. So I have no complaints about them.
Good. Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like different dealerships might have different approaches because in Tennessee, there are no dealerships or service centers. So on my road trip out to Colorado, I stopped in Wichita to get that update. And I did ask them about how do you tell people that there's an update? And they were saying that they do contact their customers. But how, for instance, there's a man who lives, like an older man who lives 2-3 hours away. And he's like, I'm not coming in for a service update. So they're like, okay, well, at least you know about it if you want the update, but it does depend. But I do think that if you're not getting like an update on your phone or a notification on your phone, that it is helpful, especially due to the fact that, I mean, if you're still on version 10 and not on version 12 yet, and it got rid of all that glitchiness, like I've been telling people, like, if you happen to have a VinFast, the few of us out there, like, go get the update. There are improvements, but also there have been automakers that have rolled out updates, software updates that have some other bugs that they introduce and then they have to fix those again. So I understand your maybe apprehension there of being like, things are okay. Maybe we don't need to change anything right now.
We're Apple users. So every couple of months, there'll be a Tuesday update to everything. And then Thursday, there'll be a re-update because they found something didn't work that they do. It's almost inevitable that you'll update your phone or your watch or your iPad on a Monday or a Tuesday. And by Thursday, there's another update. So we're pretty used to. Yeah,
but it would be nice if they got some of these updates over the air.
The other thing that we struggle with is we have not gotten the remote feature on the app to work. The app still seems under-realized. I don't know if you've had more success with the app, but we've periodically tried to unlock the door or
I find it unlocks the door, but some of the other things it doesn't do. It says, I can't do that now, or it doesn't do it at all.
Or it says you have to repair it, and we go to repair it, and it's already paired. So I think the app needs its own update at some point.
I agree. Yeah, I feel like the app has good information, where the car is, state of charge, stuff like that. But in terms of controls, I also, in the beginning, I feel like I had a little bit better luck locking the doors, but now I'm like, I can't really do anything from the phone because it does say either I can't do that or it's just like loading. So I would love to see that because I think that's such for software oriented cars like EVs to have an app that is not only has great information about your car, but that you can control it from afar would be great. So looking forward to that as well. And as I spoke to the dealership in Wichita too about over-the-air updates, their approach or what they kind of had heard from VinFast was that over-the-air updates were great, we're working at it, but there's also risk there, rolling out an update that causes cars to do this or that. So I also understand their apprehension, but to really compete, I think, in this market, especially with their not so strong reputation when they came out, they're going to have to keep improving relatively quickly to really try to wipe that off the board and get folks who aren't, as I don't know, some people are like, they're brave for bringing a VinFast in their life, but to, get people who are just like, I want a good car to drive around that's electric, to entice them, they really have to make sure the reputation's good.
Yeah. And they have a lot to overcome right now.
They do.
As far as that goes.
They do. Yeah. And so you have the combustion engine, you have the electric vehicle, line up at home. So you're seeing them side by side. I mean, BMW, longstanding automaker versus VinFast, new, very different, right? And so, but you did decide to adopt not only an electric vehicle, but a new brand, a foreign brand with an odd reputation into your life. We've spoken about that. But if you had any advice for someone looking to go electric, what do you think that would include? I mean, now you've gone on long road trips, you've driven it around as a daily driver. What would you advise?
I don't know. Like buying any other car, go out, test drive them, see what they have, see what's available. Everybody is looking for something different in a car.
I mean, know what features are important to you. As I said, it may be trivial, but we wanted a wireless CarPlay, Apple CarPlay.
Mm-hmm.
If not at this point in our life wanting a wired feature. I think ultimately you've got to sit in the car and drive it and know how it feels and know that it actually is comfortable to you and you feel secure in it.
Some of them have regenerative brakes. Some of them did not have regenerative braking. So it's interesting, the different things. So you've got to figure out what it is you want in a car and just test drive a bunch of them and check them out. Mm-hmm. But don't be afraid of it.
Yeah. And I think you have to push a little. We discovered with the VinFast, certainly before the update, pushing it revealed its flaws. Pushing buttons a little too fast. I think the very first time you had yours, you froze the screen, if I recall correctly, because either you or Kyle were treating it like a typewriter.
Well, you pushed a few buttons, and then as a result, we couldn't get it out of gear.
Right.
So we had to get out of the car, lock the car, let it reset, and then we could drive it again. That happened about 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
But again, because we pushed things too fast, but now we don't have that issue.
Right. But I think you have to stress test a little bit, because you don't want to be stress testing after you've purchased it. The dealer may not be thrilled about the stress testing, but I think you have to do that, especially with an EV where there's still quite a bit of new technology that you want to make sure it can handle. I mean, we're so used to in the combustion cars, we're so used to you just, shift it before the car's even stopped backing up. You put it into drive and you don't really hurt the transmission. When you think of the things that we do that, a decade ago would have, destroyed the car. And you got to do the same with the EV and make sure that it can hold up to that, because, you don't want to have to, you don't want to have to conform your behavior to the car.
And the other thing is, we talk about some of the issues that VinFasters have, but I'm pretty sure if you go to any car of any other dealership, they have cars that are lemons. They have cars that had glitches in them. They had cars that needed more servicing than others. So, I hate to just say, oh, it's the VinFast. All brands have those issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, and I think we show that. It's the degree of how big are the issues, how often are the issues, but with the new tech, there are going to be issues. Of course, people are not going to like the VinFast just because, fine. But a lot of people aren't going to like EVs just because they do take a little bit of a different perspective. And some argue that we shouldn't have to change our ways, of course. But I think that it's fun to drive electric, from long road trips to daily driving, to the instant torque, to the cool features that they allow. I think it's really cool to be able to embrace that. And I really appreciate both of your perspectives of, taking on a VinFast VF8 Plus lease. Perhaps we're still waiting, for the lease to go to see if you would really buy it out, because there's still way more time to see how it evolves and how it changes and how the company proceeds. And, with what happened with Fisker, another EV startup, and that did not go well, but VinFast seems to be still in the game, even with production delays. We see that with huge EV automakers in the US. So, it's just all kind of a waiting game.
But they've opened dealerships. But they've opened dealerships in many more states, it appears. So, they're
selling them in Florida. They're selling them in Texas. Yeah. There's a bunch of other dealerships that have opened.
I don't know what their success rate is, but they're certainly pushing forward with more distribution. So hopefully we'll see more on the road, and they'll get more comfortable with the adjustments that have to be made to, meet the U.S. consumer market and the fickleness. If the cars are glitchy, so are the consumers. So, it's glitchy meets fickle. So I think that's the future.
But they're also opening all over the world. I keep seeing that they're now in Germany, and they're in the UAE, and they're in so many different countries, in India. So I don't see them going away in a big hurry.
But to your point, 2 years from now, when we have 6 months left on the lease, and we're beginning our conversation about, do we buy it or do we who knows? 2 years is a long time in the life of the EV market, and who knows what's coming yet, and what the price competitiveness will be. So we're sort of staying alert. Fortunately, we have websites like yours and that are tracking quality that we can keep referring to and see whether or not it's still the best deal in the market to buy it out or turn it back in and get something else.
Yes,
and it may even be just a new VinFast because they've updated their batteries and other things that I may want the same car, but the newer model. So I don't know. I'll probably stick with electric.
Oh, that's good. I mean, just because I like when it doesn't turn people away. I think electric can be really, really fun for whatever reason that you're into it. And yeah, I'm glad to hear that you two are, satisfied with your VinFast experience. And I'll just have to keep maybe checking in with you every 6 months or so to see, or after anything big happens, really, any updates to see, okay, how are we doing, VinFast team? What's happening now?
If it crashes in between, we'll send you.
We'll send you a message.
Definitely.
We hope yours unbricks. That's a little disconcerting.
I know. Yeah, I hope we get to the bottom of it, and I'll make sure to get Jordan to update us on what on earth happened to poor VinFast VF8 out in Colorado, who's now stuck.
Yeah, because I kept looking for those podcasts, and I hadn't been seeing them.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got to get their update from the Colorado folks because they're obviously testing her. But to what degree, we got to find out. But yeah, I'll happily have him on and make sure that you see that update and continue to check in with you both about your EV experience. I really appreciate your time and energy and for reaching out. And I'm glad your road trip went well, despite the little hiccups here and there, but it's all a fun experiment.
Right.
Yep, it was.
Absolutely. Good.
It was great.
Good to see you again.
Yes, great to see you. And everyone, I know that folks always have questions about the VinFast, and Judy and Larry have the VinFast VF8 Plus, so it's a little bit different than the VinFast VF8 Eco. But if you have any questions, y'all were really great about going back through the comments and answering any of them. But let us know what you have, and we'll continue to follow up with them. But thank you again, Judy and Larry, for coming back onto the podcast to share your experience. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for another episode of the Out of Spec podcast. Drive safely, stay charged, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.